Despite harrowing stories of human suffering unfolding every day in Ukraine, I fear that the world has grown numb to this crisis. It is now over 2 years since the Russian Federation launched its full-scale armed attack on the country. 2 years of immense suffering, bloodshed, loss and grief. Countless families have been separated. More than 10,500 civilians killed, more than 20,000 injured. Actual figures are likely significantly higher. The conflict increasingly is becoming entrenched and protracted, punctuated by recurring waves of attacks as seen across the country last week. Russian Federation citizenship has been broadly imposed, and Russian authorities have conscripted male residents of Crimea into the Russian armed forces, eventually forcing them to fight against their own country. Ukrainian children have been deprived of the right to receive an education in the Ukrainian language. In the last 2 years, Russian armed forces have committed widespread violations of international human rights and humanitarian law, including unlawful killings, torture, enforced disappearances, and arbitrary detention. Holding Russian citizenship is increasingly necessary to access vital health and humanitarian services, social security, and employment. People living under occupation have been forced to undertake compulsory work for the Russian occupying authorities or to serve in the occupying army. My team documented a pattern of violence, intimidation, and coercion against public workers, including local officials, police officers, prison guards, teachers, and workers at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Many policies particularly impact or even target children. The education system now uses a Russian curriculum. Children are reading textbooks with pro-Russian narratives, justifying the armed attack on their country. Under overly broad and vague criminal definitions of collaboration, Ukrainian authorities have prosecuted and convicted local residents who did ordinary work in their local community while it was under occupation, sometimes under coercion or duress. People have been convicted for activities that an occupying power is allowed to compel people to carry out under international humanitarian law. In some cases, my office also documented torture and ill treatment, arbitrary detention, and violations of fair trial rights against individuals accused of collaboration activities. I'm deeply shocked by the Russian Federation's brutal treatment, including executions of prisoners of war, as was detailed in our periodic report covering 1 December to 29 February. My office has recorded allegations of the executions of at least 32 captured Ukrainian prisoners of war in 12 separate incidents. I heard credible accounts of harsh prison conditions without enough food and warmth, which in some cases might amount to torture. Some prisoners of war had lost half their body weight during captivity. Prisoners of war have told my staff that before visits of high-level Russian officials, torture and ill treatment would often cease and the food would be increased. It is unconscionable. The Russian Federation has the power to put a stop to the torture of prisoners of war across all facilities it controls, yet it fails to do so. The tragedy in Ukraine has gone on for far too long. I call again on the Russian Federation to cease its armed attack. The violations of international humanitarian and human rights laws by the Russian armed forces and administrative officials in occupied territory must stop at once. The occupation must come to an end. I implore the Russian Federation to take immediate action to conduct effective investigations into each allegation of execution of prisoners of war and to take steps to end their torture and ill treatment.